For those of you that don't know me, my name's Cameron Casoglis, and with Brett Gorman here, we're teaming up with Chris Chase to get the level three launch for this coming year. So thrilled that you can join us, and I'll go through a little bit of a presentation, then we'll open up to Q&A. So that we can have your questions answered. This is our agenda for this evening. We're going to look at some of the content that we're hoping to cover, and talk about the expectations. I think one of the lessons we've learned from the pilot that we did back in 2018, that I see there may be a couple of people online that were a part of that, and then the first full course that we did last year was the understanding the expectations and the workload that we're asking of people to engage in for this course. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about the online aspect of this. We'll also talk about the schedule, and then talk a little bit about our plans for the final meeting. Obviously that with the face-to-face component is a little bit up in the air. So at the moment we're planning not to do that face-to-face. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then the expectations to complete the course. So I see Chris has joined us. Welcome, Chris. Good to have you with us. So to kick it off, I think for those of you that saw some of the outline online, we're very much looking at this as building off the principles from the level 2 course. And for those, I think the one thing that everyone that looks at the course thinks, oh, well, I've done level 2, so it's now time for me to do level 3. And I think the description of the course is very much for high performance coaches or coaches aspiring to be coaching at the high performance level. And we're really looking at developing a deeper insight, and talking about the most recent research and knowledge in coaching of rowing. Of course, and also of coaching in general. I think that's one of the other aspects that we dive deeper into, and we're certainly looking for those people that are really looking at becoming independent thinkers, and addressing some of the challenges that we're facing in the sport. So that's a little bit on just the general expectations and what we're looking for, and what we're hoping that folks that go through the course will get out of this. Many of you have seen the online application that's on the USRowing website, and here's just a little bit of the outline of what we're looking for. There's looking at past coaching experiences, what results you've been able to produce as a coach, a list of your certification, and other notable coaching related achievements, and that can be anything from starting a new program all the way through to some of the aspects of the innovations, and many of you are facing a number of challenges right now through an extensive coaching career. So we're very much interested in what you've been able to achieve. Certainly any coaching related education, whether that be formal and or informal, and then references. One of the things that we're most interested in at the end of the application is for you to give us a bit of an idea of the ways that you plan to apply the learning from the course into your coaching. And I think that application is a very critical aspect of what we're looking for. So, Chris, I don't know, is there anything that you wanted to add in this first little bit in terms of expectations and the application?
Sorry, I'm late. I think you probably have already covered it, and that is we weren't good last year at explaining the workload and that what the expectations were. So everybody should be clear. I mean, the exit interviews, we were right around 100 hours of work, Cam, is what people were saying, and that's why we stretched this out. Have you already covered all this?
No.
Okay.
Look, I haven't gone so much into the past. Just very much looking at what we're planning to do this year. I think the one thing that we've learned every time we've gone through it, and the iterations of the thing, we're trying to make it as succinct and as applicable to everyone's coaching context as possible.
Yeah, I think it is important to recognize the amount of work that the quality of the work, I think people did not figure out last year how to fit it into their lives. They just thought it would be the usual US rowing courses from years ago. And this is quite the real deal, 100 hours. And then people would have to play catch up in the weekend and put forth an effort that really wasn't indicative of where they're at. So understanding the amount of work and then what the expectation for the quality of that work, I think, is important. And make sure that you can fit this into your life. And if you're going to take somebody's spot, if it's your spot, great. But what you can do with it, rather than leave somebody else out who would have done it well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, just moving on to the next slide, I think talking a little bit about some of the course content, there's an extension here on some of the core principles out of level 2, but looking at the resources such as these 2 texts, for those that don't have it, these are requirements from both editions of Rowing Faster, and then also the Successful Coaching text by Rainier Martins. Those 3 texts we pretty much go cover to cover, and to your point there, Chris, of the 100 hours, that's why and we'll talk a little bit more about the schedule, but that's one of the reasons why it's quite different to anything else that I think we've offered in the past, particularly those that may be familiar with the previous level 3. But starting off with safety and looking at the many components of that, one of the first exercises is for you to review what your safety management plan is and how timely that is, looking at the current situation that we're facing. In the second module there, we look at essentially a deeper dive into your coaching philosophy. What does it mean to be a successful coach at the high performance level? And then exploring, your skills of the how to teach. And I think one of the aspects we'll talk a little bit more about as we go along is the interactive nature of what we're trying to do. It's not just about the content, but it's very, very much about exploring different ways to engage you as a coach and to interact with others. We're definitely looking at putting a diverse group of coaches together. It's not just about what you've done necessarily, but looking at the innovations, particularly online. We're all learning and navigating this online space. Some of us have more experience than others, but that definitely fits into that third module on learning and teaching. And certainly Rainier Martins in that Successful Coaching book talks a lot about those principles. The module on biomechanics definitely looks at, the work of Valerie Kleshnev and some of the work that we've done with the national team with Connie Draper, and how that applies in different contexts. Some and many programs don't have access to the resources that, say, a national team might have, but utilizing that understanding, and it connects really nicely with the rowing technique chapter, and looking at how you apply different approaches, particularly when athletes aren't changing or you are needing to make a change. The 6th module there on rigging is definitely an applied chapter, an applied module of really expanding your understanding of what are some of the different components of rigging, and looking at different types of equipment as well. On the physiology side, probably the most extensive chapter, and really hoping to stretch people's understanding of many of us start off by doing what we've always done, or even having done to us as athletes. And this module, I think, it really challenges everybody to think about doing things in a different way when it comes to the design and understanding of the energy systems. From nutrition, looking at different approaches, and then getting into the specifics on the design of your training programs. And I think one of the activities in that methodology section really gets you to think about why you put in the annual cycle what you do, and to really challenge you to think about doing it differently. It wouldn't be complete if we didn't talk about racing. Apparently that's why many of us do it, and particularly at the high performance level. I think one of the things that we've all loved about the webinar series is the opportunity to chat about this this part of the sport, and by golly, I think we all miss it more than ever right now. So getting into the nuances of different types of racing, everything from strategy down to how does that connect to the next module on selection, and I think we put together some really unique materials here in thinking about why we do what we do with selection, and again, really challenging us all to think differently. And then the final chapter, which, to be perfectly honest, I think could be a unit a course unto itself of program direction. And I think, Chris and I have talked at length about how many of our former athletes or former assistant coaches call us when they get that job they want and say, "Oh my God, how do I do this budget now?" Or "How do I hire staff?" Or what do I do now when I've really got to fundraise on my own? So I think the nuances here of a pretty complete and pretty unique approach to what I think is a 6 months of really exciting discussion and analysis and critique of the next level of people's coaching careers. So Chris, I know there's a lot there. Do you want to add anything to that very brief?
One of the interesting bits of feedback that we were getting with last year's class was that some of them were like, "Hey, look, I just want to make boats go fast. I really could have cared less about being a program director." And in this course, there's a lot about being a program director and covering coaches, and then there are other people who really wanted that aspect of it, and really had no desire to ever be a high performance coach. And so, and the fact remains is that it's all in this one course. So, I mean, you're going to get it. It's not a question of whether you want to. Now, maybe if you were to go into and get an engineering degree and you get you could be a chemical engineering or a mechanical engineering degree. You could get either one of those in college, but here it's all in level 3. So in the future, maybe we break that out, but you're going to get it all here. And that's something you just have to be prepared to do, that you can't just take the parts you want.
Yeah. And to that end, I mean, in each of the modules, so in each of those modules, we've got content up online, and we're using an online platform called Thinkific, which for those candidates that get accepted into the course, you'll get a login, and you'll see that this is the sort of structure of each of the 11 modules. There's a bit of an introduction. We'll go into some learning objectives, and then resources that I think, for those that have already been through it and having been involved with developing this, there are resources here that you'll come back to throughout your entire coaching career. I mentioned the textbooks, some additional readings, some videos, whether it be from previous conventions, stuff that we can access online through to presentations that have been done, in different environments. We've got a bit of a summary of primary areas of focus, because there is a lot of information there. And so, for those of us that have been out of the formal learning environment, this is hopefully an area, and this will allow you to sort of focus how you approach the content, because it is overwhelming. There's a lot here. There's a bit of a quiz section, really just to challenge you, your way of thinking about some of the content, and really to give you the chance to really think about what you've retained and what you've taken from the materials. And then there are 14 tasks that add up through the course. Some multiple in modules, some there's only one in a module. But really, these tasks are the chance for you to really apply. And again, the challenge of how can we put ourselves in a position where we want to try things in a different way. So that's a little bit about the online piece. For those that end up in the course, we'll have you upload the materials onto a Google Drive, and that'll allow us to give you some feedback along the way, and pace this out, so it's not just dumping all of the coursework at the end of the period, but as we go along, we'll meet every 2 weeks. and have designated deadlines, and that'll come right from the very beginning. We'll have the first task complete at the end of July. Applications are due in a couple of weeks, so they're all up online and available right now. We'll confirm those on the 14th, and then we'll get rolling. You'll see that there are three tasks that'll be submitted in August and in October, and a couple there in September and in November. So we space it out just to give you, a little bit of forced scheduling. So again, you don't leave it up to the end. And like I said, every couple of weeks we'll get together in a Zoom conversation to touch on some of the content, but really to dive deeper into what do you see are the areas that A, challenge you, but B, each of us bring in expertise to the group. And I think that's one of the areas that we'll be looking at in terms of making very, very tough decisions about the group that we bring together. In that we hope that group really will become a cohort of folks that will learn from each other, not just during the course of the level 3, but beyond that. So, and like I mentioned right at the outset there, in the past we've had a face-to-face meeting that happens just before the convention, and we're planning to have a final, a concluding set of meetings in that first week of December, and with the current plans that the convention will actually be virtual, that we'll do that all online. But I sort of want to leave a little opening there that hopefully life will return to some sense of normalcy, but there is a pretty strong chance that we'll do this entire thing online. And like I said, I think that's presenting us a number of opportunities to learn how to do this engagement in the learning space online. And learning along the way is part of the challenge here. So at the end, there'll be a certificate of completion, and there'll be a requirement that you'll have to complete all the online materials, submitting all of the tasks before the final meeting there. And we are really, I can't stress it enough, the value and the importance of your participation and your contribution to all of the meetings. Inevitably, that with a program of this length and this magnitude, you're not necessarily going to be able to make every meeting, but I think that's very, very, very strongly encouraged that we need you. We need you to commit through the whole thing, and part of that is what you bring to the table in terms of your willingness to share the challenges, and also the learning along the way. So, again, Chris, anything else to add to that?
One of the things that we have found looking back now with the first class from last year is how we've incorporated some of those graduates into projects that we're doing and trying to pay it forward now. I mean, so a lot of the projects that we're working on at USRowing, different people from last year's class have become involved in things we're doing now. And as we look forward to having, a larger list of mentors for people to get their mentoring hours, just things like that. I hope it would be my hope that a lot of you, after getting this, would see yourselves as that kind of a person that could mentor, whether it be, your specific field is running a program, or your high performance coach, or, I'm looking through the list of people. There's 42 people signed up right now. And, I see such a wide variety of names, from Olympians to high school coaches. And so, having those people last year who graduated want to be a part of this right now is awesome. And so I would hope that somehow we could, you guys are thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and certainly, Chris, I think it's a great entry into having people ask some questions, and you can type them into the chat there if you would like. Just from an order perspective, maybe if you raise your hand over in the participant section there, just so we've got a little bit of, we're not having people talk over each other, but love to open it up for questions now, because I do think that to your point there, Chris, the important piece to this is not so much getting a level 3 certification. I know that is part of the motivation, but it's what are you going to do with this? And for to a specific example, There's a group working on long-term athlete development plan for USRowing and how we identify and develop our athlete base. While, in many examples around the world and certainly around the US, the LTAD approach is about the athlete. But I think what we're learning is it's about the overall program. It's about the club. It's about the coaches. It really is more than just, well, if you're 12 years old, what training program should I design for you? So that, I think, is a specific example of what we're talking about that comes out of the program, not as much as just what we do during the 6-month block. So I see a question from Steve. Respecting the course load, do you think it can be accomplished for a coach working with Olympic hopefuls during an Olympic year? Steve, if you're talking about a friend, it would depend on who that friend is. If you're talking about someone that you know pretty well, I would say it's going to be pretty challenging. I think that the workload that probably more is about what is required to prepare for the Olympics is every moment you've got. But yeah, balancing your coaching load with the workload of this thing, I think it's 100 hours. I think is a number that if you stretch that out over the 20 odd weeks, where would you fit that time? And it probably not systematically the same amount every week, but when you think about the day-to-day routine, can you put an hour or two into your schedule, with coaching and everything else going on? And I think that's a question that you could answer, but happy to have that conversation with anybody after the call. If you want to chat more about it with Chris, Brett, or myself, happy to field a phone call or a Zoom chat or whatever. So hopefully that answers.
You are looking at 4 or 5 hours a week, right? With COVID right now, it could be that between now and December is the actual opportune time to do it, whereas maybe the next class through the spring going into those Olympic months, probably not. But right now, if there's a chance, it's probably now.
I'll unmute John and see. Why don't you ask your question there, John?
Hey, Cam, I was just writing you, but assuming the worst case scenario arises and we're not able to get an 8s or 4s during the task requirements of this, what are our options besides guessing on angles on singles?
Good question. And look, I think what we're learning through all this is the use of video. Obviously there's some work from an instruction perspective you can do on the erg, but that was one of the challenges we faced with the 2019 group, that a lot of the activities we actually had back them up after the face-to-face. So, we're having to be fairly creative that if you can't get on the water, but yeah, it's a good question. And even some analysis of crews that you may have had in the past. I think that all is that there is an element of flexibility that we're having to factor into all of this. All right.
Right.
David, good question. Thanks. Tanya, some really good questions here. How long are the meetings roughly? We're aiming for 90 minutes, but depending on the group, I think we have to be fairly, we're trying to accommodate. So we're not going to put into a schedule right now of when that'll be. It'll be a time that the group can make. So again, there's a little bit of working with those that we select and how we bring that together so that it is realistic for everybody to make those meetings. How long is the accreditation valid for? And how long is the accreditation valid for, and if needs maintaining accreditation? At this point, we haven't got into recertification at this point. So there is not a recertification, but that is a conversation that'll be upcoming. I won't say it's valid forever, but at this point, we haven't got to a discussion point of recert at this point for any of our levels at this point. I think if we're going to get anywhere, it'll be with the level 2 before we get to level 3. And I think that also speaks to the point, Chris, you made in terms of what do you do with this work afterwards. I think that there's the mentoring component, supporting coaches. What are you doing in your particular area to bring other coaches along in the level 2 format, and the initiative of what what kind of work are you doing in the region, whether it's, clinics, putting events together. Chris is, I think, a great example of the work that he's done up in Saratoga with his coaching conference. But really it's, I think, when we come back to it, is what is quality coaching and how are we addressing that? So I think this is the group that we're really leaning on to see how that is affected in the respective regions of the country. And then Tanya, the third question, how do we show examples if we don't have access to a crew, if we cover, if we're still off the water? I think I touched on that one with John's question, Tanya, but if you want me to go into any more detail or us to go into any more detail, let me know. And then Jonathan, does the course have the flexibility for the strange times we find ourselves in? No one is rowing in boats. Some parts of the country may be rowing boats before others. Thoughts on that? Yeah, again, we have to move with the times. I think if we were waiting for normalcy to return, we wouldn't be running this level 3. And to that end, we've moved the level 2 online completely, and so we're doing everything we can to make this as flexible and as fluid as possible. And I think it certainly goes back to, the creativity, the innovation. What are other sports doing? We're not as restricted as, our friends in the contact sports. But we're certainly not, long distance running or, golf right now. So there are elements to this thing that we're going to have to be creative with. And so that gives us more of an opportunity to look at different ways to do this. So yeah. Any other questions, Chris? Any other comments while we wait to see if there's anything else? It'd be even better if you unmuted.
Well, that's not what everybody agrees, Cam. Actually, half the people on this call probably. How many? Yeah. Okay. Anna asked how many coaches we're looking for, and we're looking for about 15.
Yeah.
Last year, what did we have? 18 when we started?
Yeah.
Cam?
Yeah.
The tipping point is anywhere between 15 and ideals 15, I think, 15, 16, and then, getting past 20, we start hitting the tipping point of not being able to do things well.
And I think, just to go into that a little deeper, we've had a lot of conversations about that, and it's not unlike the sort of coach to athlete ratio. We feel like it's going to be really important that we're able to engage with each of you, in an equitable sense in terms of time, energy, and resources, but also the value of the interaction. I think we've for those of you that are teachers out there, one of the critical elements of that cohesiveness of this group. So having balanced perspectives and to be honest, who's challenging each other, I think is an element of that to keep the group fairly small. All right. Will USRowing offer this course next year if we don't get? Yeah, we will be. We're looking at running this at least once a year, if not, if we can handle it on our side, back to back. So if we can manage it so that we start in June, July, and end in December, and have the next group going. But we want it. The quality aspect is by far the most important thing. So
and quite honestly, I mean, there's enough good people out there, and especially those people coming through the course and who get what we're trying to accomplish. Quite honestly, we could have two of these going at the same time concurrently if we had enough people to present it. It would just come down to having another Zoom account and the right instructors, whether it be by chapter or, from start to finish. If we had more of that available, we could probably open up 2 of these at the same time, 2 groups of 15. That's what we're working towards.
All right. If there aren't any other questions, Brett, I don't know if you wanted to add anything in terms of your perspective on just, being a part of the initial planning and preparation for this. But certainly the lines are open for questions after this call in between now and July 8th when the applications close. But thrilled that so many of you have been able to join. I know it's late for those of you on the East Coast. And the Zooming that we're all doing, it gets pretty exhausting, I know. So appreciate everyone's commitment to being on the call tonight. So, again, happy to answer any other questions, but if that's all, we'll let you fly away. Brett, before we wrap up, did you want to add anything?
No, I guess just so everyone understands my role in this, I see myself as very much logistical support, organizational support, and I aspire to do this course. Eventually, I've been telling Cam for the last 2 years that I want to do it. Now it's not the best time for me, so I too will be looking forward to doing it. So, but feel free to send questions, my way. Like, I'm available. I've moved over to coach certification, pretty close to full time. I'm still doing the U23 thing, but we're doing virtual, so that this is where the bulk of my time is being spent. So please, so Tanya, contact me.
Yep. Good, thank you, Tanya. I was just typing a response to your chat question there. So all right, guys, well, again, we'll leave it there, and again, appreciate everyone being on.
That was meant for everybody. Hi, everybody.
How was the webinar, Kim?
It was good. It was good. I thought, again, tricky topic to navigate. But I thought Lizzie did a superb job. I mean, it's she for me, and I don't know your thoughts, Brett, but for me, it's that balance of that she had elements of the research, but how to apply it, and she was, she had some really great concrete examples, which I think, it's just such an important aspect, because it can be either too theoretical or too fluffy. I thought she navigated that perfectly. What do you think, Brett?
No, I agree. I'm sorry, I'm just responding to someone that messaged me privately from this. Email me. I thought it started a little bit slow, but then I thought once we really got into it, that it got really good. And I thought the questions were really good. And Deb Arberg was on there, so I'm saying she was asking some really good questions. And I thought it was good.
I feel like that kind of topic, once it takes the questions to get it going, because then you can start thinking how it impacts when your everyday coaching.
Yep.
And then you start thinking about it like, well, wait a minute. And then you start wondering, have I responded correctly when I've crossed this, or whether I knew or not. Hi, Anna. Yeah, I missed you too. I feel like, we see each other every day almost.
We definitely had people say, "Where's Chris?" Like,
yes, I didn't feel right.
People are concerned that you're gonna get up and quit or something. That like you're gonna reach a breaking point and just go.
No, I mean it's part of what drives it, though. I mean, hi, Emery. It's funny because I'm gonna go back and watch that, because I looked at the her PowerPoint. And I thought it'd be, there are just so many things that we need to be aware of. We need to be thinking about. We're so fixated on making a boat go fast that sometimes we forget that some of those parts of the boat are people. Yeah. And it's really important that we're making sure that, they're healthy through the process.
Yeah, I'm doing a webinar for the International Coaching Association on care in coaching. And care in coaching has taken off in the research, particularly the high performance level. And it's this paradox of how do you push an athlete without pushing them to a point of injury. And I think in the youth sports space, while Lizzie she was very, very focused on the trauma piece and veterans, the broader conversation of how do we show care and compassion. And sometimes that's not being quote unquote nice. That's very simply saying no. That we are not doing more right now. So I think that's a conversation that I think we can extend that certainly goes beyond the constraints and confines of rowing. But definitely it's growing. It's getting more and more legs in terms of what people are talking about.
Yeah. Cam, since we're here, one of the topics I was thinking about is, how to get used to different styles of coaching when you have a lot of different kinds of coaches. And of course, like some high schools have a different coach every other season, right? Or then you go to college and you get a totally different coach. It's somebody had put it in as an idea for one of the topics for the coxswain camp. And, she had said, you can take this one out and put in, how to deal with different coaches, because she had trouble navigating her national team experience.
Yeah.
She had a kind of coach back home. She had the kind of coach, at ODP or Kinemax, and then goes to the national team and gets another kind of coach, junior national team gets another kind of coach, and then college again. So, how do you navigate that? So I thought that was an interesting topic, for the coxswains especially. So many different expectations put on the coxswains.
And yeah, I mean, to Kip, your point, I mean, and I thought Lizzie did a really good job of yelling over shouting, of using volume. I mean, we can be very, very tough, even without the emotion. I think sometimes you take the warmth out and be cold, and the fewer words or the silence that we use. So, I think the role and responsibility that we're all having now, a heightened level of emotional intelligence, the awareness of all of those impacts. I think it's growing, but you're right. I mean, there are so many different ways to get the point across. And I think we've gone beyond the days of, well, I don't want to upset people. It has to be more, we have to be more insightful. And I think she did a really good job of how are we taking the time to understand our athletes. I mean, how many athletes have you and I, coached over the years? How many do you know actually have had a traumatic experience, that without you actually having an event, but, just with the depth of conversation and experience you have, you say, I know these kids really well, but how much do you really know,
Right. And then, well, I mean, even something as simple as when we talked about, what was the first time I think it came up was with Steve Gladstone, like every kid learns differently. And remember we were talking about how Steve says the first time that he hears somebody can't get it, he doesn't question the kid. He questions, what did I say, or what could I have said to make that kid have a better understanding? And so with, the Howard Gardner, multiple intelligences kind of thing, how much is on us? And this is probably, it's funny. I didn't think about this last year, but looking at how we present this chapter in level 3 for teaching, how much of it is on us, whether it's you're talking about coaching care or just reaching them, the different ways that you can reach an athlete. So, I mean, I still feel like ways that we can flesh out even this course even more as when we're in that moment.
Yeah, and look, as we've talked about, how are we going to update this thing? I'm getting very close to the pseudoscience literature on neuromyths. There's a lot of literature out. Well, there's a growing amount of literature out there saying, the learning styles that debunks all of that. That in very concrete ways says it depends on who you're coaching. It depends who the student athlete is, and the context that, you may be a visual learner in one context and a kinesthetic learner in another. And so to say that, well, I'm an auditory learner may actually be true, but the research is really pulling that apart. And a lot of teachers and coaches don't understand the complexities of the learning styles, because you hear it somewhere and say, oh, well, yeah, I only use 10% of my brain. Well, where did that come from? And it is not true, So understanding those really current trends in the literature and in practice is not so much what's been written in a research article, is how does it affect your ability to coach and connect with those that you're working with. So.